Hello everyone, welcome back to Fanblade. Well, it's been a few months since I've built anything, the bench is clear, time to start a new project. I want to build Electric Upright Bass version 2.0. About a year and a half ago, I embarked on a journey to get to grips with upright basses, and you may have seen the one that I made, you may not have. It was very much a case of making it up as I went. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it did work, it was good, and it sort of lit a fire underneath me, and very shortly afterwards I went and got an actual double bass. So 18 months later, I've got a much better idea now of what I want an electric upright bass to be, and while that first one, was very much my first steps on the learning curve, I'm significantly higher up it. Not at the top, I hasten to add. I'm still learning things every single day, but I feel now that I actually have a much better idea of what I'm doing if I'm building an electric upright. I've got some pretty specific ideas of how I want the design on this one to go, and what I want is something similar to an Ampeg baby bass. These things are cool. I like the visual aspect of having the double bass shape there, and I love the fact that it's small. Because the whole idea of an electric upright is that acoustic uprights are just inconveniently big. There's no way to escape that fact. You need a station wagon, you need somewhere to store them. They are wonderful instruments, they sound amazing, but you have to work your life around them in quite a lot of respects. The maximum width that I can book match on my bandsaw is 200mm, so that means this thing's going to have a maximum width of 400. I suppose that's about 400, and then we'll work out the rest of the dimensions as we go. I did look into various aspects of traditional violin-shaped design, and there's an awful lot of circles to be drawn, there's an awful lot of maths to do to work out the ratios of those circles, and frankly, I'm just going to eyeball it. Again, this is not an acoustic instrument. We're not looking for exact ratios, I just want it to look okay. So that's the design brief. A double bass with essentially a cello-sized body. In fact, I did actually look at getting an old cello just to see if I could retrofit a neck on there. Couldn't find one. No problem, I'll just build one from scratch. Let's design. Alright, I feel like that's a semi-respectable place to start. There's more than a slight whiff of Hofner about it, and I ain't mad at all. It feels like it's a little bit stretched out to me. I might like to just try and pull it in just a tiny tad, but what I do want is for the neck to join the body right at the 12th fret. This is so that as I'm playing, the hand is going to hit the neck joint right at that point, and there's going to be all of my 12th fret harmonics. I say fret, it's going to be fretless, you know what I mean. So that is definitely by design. The rest is, gonna need some tweaking. Also, whether or not I want to put F-holes in this, because as I say, this will be a hollow instrument. Undecided. Design work to do. I now have a design that I'm very happy with. I've got quite a nice violin-esque shape. I did actually go to a shop and measured a real cello, and this is 650. Standard half-size cello is 655. Purely by eyeballing it, landed right on the money there. Love it. I ran out of space to draw the headstock, so I took some measurements and transferred them all down here to get the angles right, and this is now my headstock. It's pretty much identical to the first one, except instead of angling the edges in slightly. I'm just not going to make it hard on myself. These are parallel. Rather than building it out of 3 blocks of wood, I'm going to use a one-piece chunk of Quilla, and I've given myself a little bit of extra depth so that the tuners that I was going to use last time will actually fit this time. That's nice. This is a fingerboard blank. This was an offcut from the last one of these that I did. I've kept this hanging around because it's just a little bit bigger than I need, which is exactly what I need. The rest of the neck is going to be one piece of this beautifully quarter-sawn chunk of Quilla. I'm going to build the neck to this line here, and then the rest of the fingerboard's going to overhang. This is because what I want is to be able to rest my thumb on the underside of the edge of the fingerboard, about there. I can't do that on the first one of these that I made because it's one solid neck all the way up. There's nowhere to really rest your thumb. So, going to have a bit of overhang, bit of a thumb rest. So this giant slab of wood here is a piece of mahogany, and it's not quite wide enough. It needs a little bit glued on each side. That's fine, I've got plenty of extra material to work with, but it might be nice to try and get a second body out of this, and what I figured is that I can take my standard body shape and I can actually, there is just enough length to do this. I can have that as the bulk of an upright bass, and then there's just enough to fit this on here. And then these cutouts here will be the pieces that I can glue on to the sides of the body there. So, ironically, before I can even cut this body shape out, I need to trim the rounds off these edges here, then I need to cut out a body blank for another bass, so I can use the offcuts of that to complete the shape here. Sound convoluted? You're right. This is going to be chambered, and then the top's going to go on, and I do have a whopping great piece of elm that's got some incredibly crazy grain going on here. It also has some unfortunate nail holes. I'm less concerned about the nail holes. I can pretty much fill them in with some sawdust and wood glue and make them disappear. There's so much going on with this grain that visually they won't even enter into the equation. They'll just disappear. So yes, this is going to be the top, book matched, going on a hollowed out chunk of this with the offcuts of that body glued to it. One piece Quilla neck, fingerboard, pretty simple really. Alright, neck blank. All I really need to do to this is mark out and then cut out the centre of the peg box, and then I can just glue the fingerboard on. That's pretty much that. I didn't use a truss rod in the first one, and that was absolutely fine, even over the longer distance. It hasn't bent even just a little bit, it's just stayed rock solid. So over a shorter distance, it'll be absolutely fine, and then whatever relief I do want, I can just sand that into the fingerboard. Yeah, and that's going to be pretty much it. These things are not complicated. I'm going to trim down, probably take about 1 centimetre off the fingerboard, because there is quite a lot of thickness. I mean, it is just quite a chunky thing. Upright necks are just chunky, they just are. I have now a body blank. Sort of wasn't expecting to have that, but now that I've got it, what do you think I should do with it? Leave a comment. The body is drying over there. It'll be 24 hours before I can declamp that and then mark the pattern on and start chambering it. So yeah, I think headstock, and cut a massive chunk out of the centre of it. Right, the neck is down there, it's drying. I've now got to turn my attention to the body, which should be ready to go now. I've got to make a template for this thing, because this new roll of paper that I've got here, it's not very good. And yes, that neck just ripped a hole in it, so I need to pull a template from this design pretty much immediately, because I can tell it's just going to get absolutely wrecked. So, I have got a piece of acrylic, and it's not actually green, that's just the protective film that's on it. I'm not going to do a whole template because I just don't have enough acrylic, but I can get half of it out of this piece, and that, given that it's a symmetrical shape, should be enough for me to mark that on the body, then work out where my cavities are going to go. I have decided against F-holes on this one, just because the locations of them, acoustically, they would be in line with the bridge, and down there they're going to look a bit stupid. Up here, where they would normally be, around about the cutouts, it's just going to be too visually cluttered, especially given the extreme grain pattern that I'm going to be using. I want that grain pattern to speak for itself. The F-holes are just going to get in the way of that. So, as an aesthetic choice, no F-holes. It's not going to matter at all acoustically, as I say. Marking and cutting a template. Good times. It's a big mahogany thing. That is disconcertingly large. I'm going to hollow out large chunks of this. Obviously, I need to leave it solid around the neck pocket, solid around the bridge, and probably give myself maybe 3/4 of an inch around the outside to glue the top on. But I also need to leave some space for the spike to go in. On the first one of these, of course, I mounted it on a stand, and that was, I guess it was a practical solution at the time, but it doesn't actually work all that well. It was a little bit wobbly, a little bit flimsy, and the other thing I discovered is that if you're on stage and lines of sight aren't quite perfect and you just want to shuffle a little bit to the side, well, you've got a massive contraption you have to drag around with you, and it just wasn't great. So this one will be mounted on a spike. What sort of spike? Well, a long one. Because this is a smaller body, of course, I'm going to need the thing to be raised up to the level that I can play it. Smaller body means longer spike, and I've got an interesting solution. This is a mic stand boom arm, and it is made of steel, and it is telescopic. These parts are plastic. That bracket's plastic as well, which I don't love, but, you know, I'll find a solution for that. Essentially, I'm going to cut that off, cut the plastic bits off, and mount this tube in the body. The actual boom arm itself will be travelling separately, and when I come to set the base up, I'll simply shove that in there. There will be a knob on the back to lock it in place, and then of course I can set that to the desired height. When I'm routing out all the cavities and everything, I need to make sure that I've got sufficient strong material around there to do that. So yes, plenty of material left around the neck pocket, plenty of material left around the bridge and the spike, and oh yes, and maybe an inch or an inch and a half up the centre just for rigidity, just to stop the thing from folding up under pressure. I'm going to mark all that out, and then I'm going to hog out a ton of mahogany. So we've taken nearly 2 kilograms worth of mahogany out of that. That's very good. Had a couple of bizarre things happen. The spring on my drill press is broken. It's not supposed to do that. And that happened with just a few left to go, and I just sort of very unsafely managed to get through it, but I don't recommend that. This doesn't look very good. I'm not the least bit concerned. Without any F-holes, none of this is going to be visible. Cosmetically, this doesn't matter at all. Normally, I would come in and I would clean up these points. I'm not going to, simply because more gluing surface means more better. So, yeah, really all I need to do with this now is to sand a bit of the varnish off, or, well, preferably all of the varnish, actually, and then I can stick the top on. Now, speaking of the top, now I've had a little bit of a change of heart with the top. I was originally going to use this piece and sort of take a slice about there, and sort of I like the way the grain sort of loops around there and then it sort of comes up the centre. Then, of course, there's all these holes in it, and of course the grain goes very weird, and it might look wonderful if it's book matched. But I'm just a little bit unconvinced. Also, with the template, I've been able to find a slightly better solution. This is another piece from the same bookshelf. In fact, I believe this shelf was originally connected to one of these sets of nails. But it's got this awful business here, but with the top rammed right up to the end, I can just miss those out. And I like the way the grain on this one's just running a little bit straighter up there. You've got the internal grain, which will pop beautifully, as well as all this this business down here. That should look, I believe, a bit more elegant than all of whatever's going on down here is just going to look very cluttered. But this is going to look actually properly brilliant. Well, that was a little bit weird. It started off a bit uneven at that end. This is because I did check that the blade was perfectly square to the table, but the guide, my fence, he laughingly calls it, it was just, those clamps must have just been pulling it a little bit off. But that's all right. Along the centre, where they'll be joined, they're dead centre, they're dead even. And how do they look? Yeah. Yeah, I can deal with that. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. By the time I do a lot of sanding and staining on this, all of the grain all the way through these parts here is just going to really pop. This is going to look like quite something. And like I say, the book matching was a little bit uneven on the outer edges, so it's a bit thicker there than it is there. But the centre, dead flat. That's with, well, a bit of sanding, but that'll be a pretty seamless match. Yes, excellent. Now, again, I've got to take all the varnish off before I can glue it all together. So, yes, I've avoided it for months, but now it is time to do some sanding. here it is. Trimmed, rough sanded. You can start to get a picture of how it's actually going to look. In fact, if we pop the neck on, so that I'll line that up, approximately centered and straight, you can really get a picture of the instrument that I'm making here. So, yes, that seems like a pretty good place to end the video. Yeah, come back next week, and I'm going to do a lot of work on the neck. I'm wondering about putting binding on this. The only binding I have is black, and I'm not sure what I want to do stain-wise or how it's actually going to look. Yes, let me know in the comments what you think I should do about that. And yes, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing, and I will see you next week. Cheers.